Hi, everybody. It's with great pleasure that Irma, Katy and I welcome you here this afternoon, and we are extremely grateful for all the help and support that we've had from not just all of you, but from the team at the Abbey and indeed the TicketSolve team who are here today to support us as well. We are live streaming the event, so bear with us with roving mics just for the sound for those people who are watching online. And also, the first event that we don't have to say you're on mute in quite some time is going to be a real joy, but we might get to there yet. The journey to today has been a long one. Over the last few years, people have been through extraordinarily difficult times, trying to reopen, rebuild audiences, and maintain and protect programmes. I know that people have had difficulties, and it's not without some irony that we're here today in the Abbey, who lost the show last week, as indeed other people have lost shows as well. But I suppose the discussion about audiences became very important and very critical over the last few months, when people realised that maybe audiences weren't returning in as big a number as they might have expected, or not as quickly as expected. So we are hugely thankful to all of the people who've contributed to making this presentation and discussion today happen, not least of which are the Arts Centre and Venues Working Group, which is a Theatre Forum working group where this discussion started initially, with the support of the Arts Council for a facilitated group discussion to which many people contributed, plus Katy and Heather for taking on the Missing Audiences survey brief, but more importantly for today, what to do next. How can we work to help you and support you to develop audiences through the next coming months, which may prove to be a challenging and difficult time, but I think hopefully today we offer some support and some guidance or signposts as to how you might be able to do that effectively. Not to jump ahead, we'll get through this agenda this afternoon. The initial focus is on the Missing Audiences survey findings, and then followed by a discussion of what those findings might mean, leading into a look at an audience development tool that Katy and Heather have worked together on. We'll be inviting your contributions all the way through, and we'll outline very clearly the next steps, which we'd ask you to comment about and contribute to and enhance and improve in whatever way you think is appropriate. So over to you, Katy.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Anna, and thank you so much for inviting me over to spend the afternoon with you today. I'm Katy Raines. I'm CEO of Indigo. Before COVID, we were a consultancy. Since COVID, all we seem to have done is research audiences and find out what the heck they're all thinking and what they've been doing. Excuse me. So I feel like I've spent the last 2 years immersed in COVID land, as I'm sure you have as well, and I've very much immersed myself in trying to understand what audiences have been thinking and feeling, and talking to lots of organisations about what we might do about that. So I'm going to present to you today the results of the Missing Audiences Ireland survey. We did a similar one in GB, and we've done a similar one in the north of Ireland. So if you're interested at all in any comparisons, all of that information is available. But we're going to focus today on what's come out of the Irish research and what we think that might mean. So the way the survey was done, I know a lot of you in the room will have been part of the survey. Basically, we created links for you to send out to your audiences, to people on your databases, so that we could ask them questions about what they've been doing, how they're feeling. So we had 36 participating organisations who did that. Each of them sent a link out to their own audiences, and then they also had a link to look at their own results in real time. So if you're one of the organisations, you should be able to see your own results. But what I'm going to show you today is the aggregated results for all of you. So 73% of the organisations who got involved were arts centres and 27% theatres. and we had nearly 9,000 audience responses. So this is a really good, robust sample that we can be really confident is a big enough number to be representative of your theatre audiences. That's the age profile, which is obviously older than the population, but I would suggest, and it'd be interesting to know whether Heather agrees, that this is very representative age-wise of the theatre audience in Ireland.
In most venues,
yeah,
absolutely.
in most venues. So again, I feel confident that the responses we're looking at are representative of people who were previously going to theatre in Ireland. 8% identify as deaf or disabled. The reason we asked this question, and we asked it specifically as do you identify as deaf or disabled, rather than my preference, which is usually asking people about their access needs, because it's about their need rather than their disability. The reason we asked it this way was because of the context of COVID and around particularly people who are disabled or vulnerable being treated differently in regard to COVID, shielding and all those sorts of things. And what we'd seen in previous bits of research that we'd done is in some cases, this cohort did have different views than the rest of the cohort. We put the surveys out, it was all pretty quick, but some of you may have seen me do an interim presentation online of this, which was 3 weeks worth of results, but what I'm going to show you today is the full results that took us up to earlier this week. And it's important to note that of this sample, 36% of them say that they attend cultural events 10 or more times a year, or did before COVID. So this is a very highly engaged, theatre-going cultural audience. Okay, so we deliberately not looking at the general population. So if you need to know what they're thinking about this is not the research for you. This is about people who were previously very engaged in coming to theatre and performances and what they're feeling about it. We took the view early on in the pandemic that, you know, there will be other people talking to the population about what they're thinking. We really wanted to know what theatre goers and cultural audiences were thinking, because if they're not coming back, we really are in trouble. So, you know, we know we've got a big job to do with people who aren't coming and have never come, but we needed to start with what we thought was the low-hanging fruit. So, on to the results. So the first question we asked them was, have you actually attended any cultural events, activities or venues since venues reopened? So we kept it really wide, because that could include a visit to a heritage property, a gig, a music event, could be a cinema. So, you know, have you done anything cultural, basically? And the good news is that 84% of them had. A further 4% have got a booking or have got plans in the diary to do something. And only 12% haven't been back to anything. So we're calling that our holding out segment, because they're the people who not only haven't been to anything, but they also haven't got anything in the diary. Okay, so for some reason they're holding out. So the first thing we're going to do is just look at that holding out segment. So for the next few slides, I just want you to bear in mind that this is 12% of the overall respondents, and we're just going to focus in on that little slice for a minute. So, not sure if you can see that, but we asked them, okay, so you haven't been to anything. Could you tell us which of the following might be reasons for that? So the top ones are the big yellow bar at the top, 50%. I'm avoiding interacting with crowds of people. The second one is that I'm concerned other people won't comply with the venue's voluntary COVID safety requirements. Okay, and they're the two biggest ones. So in other words, I'm trying to stay away from crowds of people who I don't think are going to behave themselves. Yeah, so that's where it's at. So for these people, that's your key focus really, isn't it, for your marketing messaging? It's about either persuading them that there's not going to be crowds of people there because you've got things to manage that, or that you've got a much better reason that means it's worth taking a risk and being amongst crowds of people. It's interesting, isn't it, because previously we used to sell stuff on the fact that you'd be amongst crowds of people. And for this lot, that's the last thing they want. So that's a bit of a problem. But it's largely sort of COVID hesitancy we're talking about for these people who are holding out. But then we said, well, what have you missed? If you haven't been to anything for 2 years, what have you missed from attending? And remember, these are really highly engaged cultural attenders. So what have they missed about not attending cultural events and venues? And the top one is the buzz of being at a live event. You know, there's nothing better, is there? You can't replace that. A digital interaction online is not going to replace that. The second one is really interesting. Having something special to look forward to get me out of the house. That's what they've missed. And these are the people who haven't been to anything. And interestingly, I'm not going to do this all the way through because I know it's really annoying when people do this, but that's much higher than England. Right? In England, that's way down. So, you know, the Irish theatre goers really miss that getting out there and having something to look forward to. And then the third one down is seeing performers I know and or admire in the flesh. That sense that you're in the presence of the actors that you love, the performers that you love, and they're there and you're sharing that experience and it's unique. And then further down are things like supporting my local venue, which is quite high, 36% saying that, which is really encouraging. And then the shared experience in the auditoriums right down there. Whereas previously, I wonder whether that would have been a bit higher up. I don't know. And then further down are things like being in an audience of like-minded people, making a night of it, having dinner and a show. That's quite a long way down. And then quality time in the company of family and friends. They clearly don't like their family and friends. So, okay. But again, these things should perhaps, and we'll come back to this a bit later, these things are a bit of a clue as to how we might start to focus some of our marketing messaging on reminding people of the things that they used to enjoy about it, the things they've missed, the things they're nostalgic about for their trips to the theatre. And then remembering, we're still talking about this 12% who haven't been to anything. If you had to say now, and some of these responses were just this week, how you're feeling about booking or planning a visit, which of the options would you choose? Only 40% say, I'm happy to book or visit now if there's something I want to see. 10% of them aren't planning to book or visit at all. That's really scary. And 50% are saying, oh, I'd rather wait until the COVID risk is lower. You do have to wonder what they're waiting for. I mean, I know we've seen a spike in the last couple of weeks and everything, and it seems to be back on the agenda again. But we ran exactly the same survey in England and in the north of Ireland in February, and they were still saying that back then when it did look like everything was over. So, don't know. Okay. And then the final question that we asked these people was, as things stand today, in the next 12 months, do you expect to attend cultural events and venues more or less than pre-COVID? And I don't think it's a great surprise to see that for this audience, this holding out segment, over 50% are saying I'm going to come less often or much less often than I did before, because they haven't been to anything. Okay, so that's kind of what you'd expect. But when you just pause for a minute and go, but hang on a minute, these people were very, very frequent attenders before, and over 50% of this 12% are saying, oh, I'm going to go a lot less than I did before. So we're going to unpack that a bit later, aren't we? Okay. So now I would like to look at the other bit. I would say half, but it's a lot more than half. So our lovely 88% of people who have either been back or have plans to come back. So let's focus on those now. Go on. There we are. Okay. So one of the questions we asked these people is, okay, so you've been back to cultural events. 84% of you have been back to something. Another 4% have got a booking. Have you been to the organisation that sent you this survey? Because obviously you each sent it out to your audiences. And only less than 2/3 of them had. Okay, so there's a big chunk there of people that are back, they're going back, they're not COVID hesitant like the holding out people, they're not avoiding naughty people, they are up for it, but they haven't been back to your organisation. So why haven't they been back to your organisation? Well, they haven't been back because there hasn't been anything I've wanted to see. So for them, it's about the programme or the reason to go back. They want to go back, but there hasn't really been anything that's enticed them back. It's not COVID hesitancy with this lot. So again, is there a clue there for our programming and our marketing messaging? Okay. Then we asked these people how often they expect to attend compared with pre-COVID. And it's sort of balanced out, really. There's some of them at the far end saying, oh, I'm going to come less often. Some of them saying they're going to come more often, and the majority in the middle going about the same. Okay, so the encouraging news is that this lot are really, they're open to persuasion, I think. They're coming back and they're in the game. Okay. Then we asked these people, so when you go to a cultural event, are you more or less likely to do any of the following stuff? Have a drink or snack at the venue, pre-order drinks for the interval, go out for a meal somewhere nearby or buy a programme. So we're interested in to what extent this is going to affect the secondary spend, because we know for a lot of you that's a really big part of the income equation. And interestingly, slightly worryingly, pre-ordering drinks for the interval, having a drink or snack at the venue, they're less likely to be doing these things. They're more likely to go out for a meal somewhere nearby, but that's not going to help you because that's not money in your bank. And they're less likely to buy a programme. They're probably, I don't know if any of you are doing digital programmes or what it is, or I don't know why they're not going to buy a programme. It can't just be because they're handling something, surely. Anyway, so that's just in there to sort of just have a think about, are there things that you could do to make them just feel that that's a bit more available to them? Presumably, they're just trying to minimise the time they're spending in the venue, that if they are coming, they're going to come in and see the show and leave. And that doesn't help you because you want that secondary spend. So how, are there things we could do to make that safer for them or perceived safer for them? Okay, so let's talk about risk and safety measures and things. I can't believe we're back talking about this stuff again, but anyway, we are. So we asked people to rank things as whether they were more or less risky than going to a cultural event in an indoor venue. And all the things in red they think are more risky than going to the theatre or going to an indoor seated venue. Going to the gym, indoors drinking at a pub or bar, going on public transport, and we're really in trouble, having both been on an aeroplane today, going on an aeroplane. COVID-riven. So all of those things are more risky than going to the theatre. And the things they think are less risky, bizarrely, staying overnight with family and friends. We know that COVID is household transmission, so it's not rational at all, but they want to do that. So they're kind of going, well, that's all right, it's not risky, is it? Staying overnight in a hotel, similarly. I mean, bonkers. We're doing that as well, aren't we? Shit. Indoor dining in a restaurant. So, but what I take from this is, this lot don't think it's a big risk to go to the theatre. They don't see coming to a cultural venue as being particularly risky, really. So I don't think that's what's going on. And then we asked them how comfortable would they feel attending a performance with no restrictions in place, which is pretty much where we are now, I think, in most cases. And interestingly, the total at the bottom, sorry, this is a bit graph-tastic, this one, sorry. But at the bottom, 24% of all respondents say they'd be very comfortable and another 36 fairly comfortable. And then what we've done here is we've broken out the difference between that holding out segment, the people who haven't been back, and the people who have been back. And even in the holding out segment, 21% are very comfortable and 37% fairly comfortable, in theory, but they're not bloody doing it, coming to a performance with no restrictions in place. So it's not quite as bad as you might think. And would any of the following make you feel more comfortable attending? So for the ones who've been back, all audiences and visitors encouraged to wear masks is, what's that? Hang on. 45. Just have to check. 45. Say that that would make them feel more comfortable if all visitors were encouraged to wear masks. But weirdly, at the bottom, masked performances taking place within a run of shows. So by that, I think we mean everyone has to wear a mask, and only 9% of people want that. So again, it's a little bit contradictory, isn't it? And it's not very rational. But as you'd expect, the holding out segment is higher. You know, so 58% of the holding out segment say they would feel more comfortable if all audiences were encouraged to wear masks. But bear in mind, that's 58% of 12%. Okay, so it's marginal, really. Socially distanced performances taking place within a run of shows. I think I know one organisation who's doing that, and they have the luxury of tons of funding, long run of shows, and able to probably offer the socially distanced performances on the least attractive nights. But they have a really old audience. So they've probably worked out that actually they need to offer that in order to keep their old audience, who also give them lots of money and donations, engaged. If you haven't guessed who they are, I'll tell you who they are later. Okay, so Carol Vorderman alert. I am now going to do some dodgy maths. No, it's not dodgy. I have had it checked by some proper statisticians. So what I've tried to do is say, okay, so with all of those numbers, what might that mean for your average theatre or arts centre in Ireland? So I've come up with the missing audiences calculator. Took a long time to come up with that. Okay, so we have got 12% of people not returning to anything. Then you've got another 37% of people who are going to cultural stuff, but they're just not coming to you. And then you've got a bit of a reduction in frequency from those people saying we're going to come a bit less often. So if you add all those things up, what's that? Because that's bookers. How do we translate that into actual tickets? So what we've done, this is where the dodgy maths comes in. We've come up with the fictional Indigo Playhouse, which doesn't exist. It's very, very badly run theatre. I'll tell you a bit about it in a minute. But their average capacity over a year pre-COVID was 66%, which I believe, Heather, is about right for Ireland. And the balance of tickets sold to people returning and new audiences is about 60-40. That's about the same. Okay, so those are the assumptions we've made. So we take those figures from the survey and we play them through into what does that mean for actual tickets, the reduction in tickets. So that 12% of bookers not returning anything translates into about 6% of tickets, 15% those not returning to you, and 5% the reduction in frequency. And that gives us a 26% reduction in capacity, which if you then knock that off, your 66% takes you down to a really scary looking 40%. Having been a marketer, theatre marketer all my life, 66 is about respectable. 40, I would get bollocked, basically. So, but it's worth saying, A, the Indigo Playhouse is really rubbish because they are going to change absolutely nothing. They're going to go back to their programming model as it was before. They're going to assume that their audiences are going to behave exactly as they did before, and they're going to change nothing. And they're going to be in big trouble. But I think what Heather and I are going to try and talk to you about this afternoon is how doing nothing isn't an option, and what we do have in our toolbox to help us chip away at some of this. But I think it's useful to have something like this because I think there are people who, are, especially on the programming side, who can still be quite blinkered. I'm probably being overcritical, but I think it is easy to just go, well, why aren't they coming? Why isn't it like it was before? And let's just make it so. And I do think it's worth just bearing in mind the challenge we've got in front of us, but it's not insurmountable and we can do things about it. Okay.
I have to say, Katie, that when I saw that 26%, I had kittens. You know, that's a really scary number, isn't it? But actually, when I looked at it more closely, there is some really good news because, well, better news then, all right. Because when we saw the Arts Council's huge piece of research that they do every year from autumn 2021, 81% of audiences of the population who had been attending before COVID said that they intended to come back. And what this is showing us, because I must admit I was pretty sceptical, what your research is showing us is that that's actually happened in reality. You know, 84% have actually come back already, and you've got a further chunk that are coming. But we need to really do something about this, because the 26% drop in ticket sales is very, very scary. I mean, maybe it's the detail. I mean, because you've got a big sample, and okay, 36% of them have been 10 or more times, but that means that, you know, just under 2/3 are less frequent than that. And I know you've done a lot of kind of detailed analysis of this. Is there any difference between the core audience, who we love dearly because they come 10 or more times a year, my goodness, and that occasional audience that makes up the majority of our ticket buyers? I mean, you know, we hope that this frequent cohort, our lovely, lovely loyal audience, are more likely to come back and will come back just as often. Oh.
Sorry. Now, it's really weird because when I've looked at frequency before for anything, it's always the most frequent people are always the most likely to do things, are always the most engaged. In this case, the people who are holding out are much more likely to be in that high frequency band, which is why the 12% not coming back is slightly misleading, because they could be worth a much bigger chunk of tickets than that. And it's largely to do with age. Okay. So it's not because more frequent people are more scared about COVID. It's that older people are more scared about COVID, and your more frequent bookers are more likely to be in that older demographic. So the frequency thing is a bit of a red herring, but we do need to bear it in mind because it makes that 12% actually a bit scarier than it sounds. Sorry.
So is the opposite true then? So are the less frequent people less likely to be anxious about COVID?
Well, younger people are more likely to be less anxious about COVID, and statistically, the less frequent people are more likely to be at the younger end.
And that's certainly shown in your sample, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Now, obviously, there are some old people in the infrequents, and there's some young people in the frequents, but on average, that's how it's playing out.
Okay, so that's not good news. No, okay. Can we look at this logic thing? I'm kind of a bit confused, because you're saying that 58% of those holding out are very or fairly comfortable attending a performance with no restrictions. But, I mean, that's only 4 percentage points different from the people who've actually come back. What on earth is that about?
It's completely illogical on the one hand, but it's all about perceived risk, isn't it? And we did another piece of research where we asked people who had a booking in the diary how they were feeling before they attended, what their kind of level of worry and anxiety was about the, you know, and for most people, we did it quite early on, so it was going to be their first attendance since COVID. And there was a kind of moderate level of anxiety, even though they'd sort of booked a ticket. And then we asked them the day after the performance how they felt about it, and it had gone right up. And not the anxiety, the confidence. Sorry, misleading there. So what we deduced from that was that the act of attending built confidence. And if you haven't attended something for 2 years and there's this sort of low level of anxiety and it becomes more of a barrier the longer you leave it, and people have just got out of the habit, I think. So that kind of getting them over that hurdle of that first visit back is the crucial thing we've got to do. Because then reinforcing the fact that they've had a good time, and the number of people that think, oh, I don't know what I was worried about. I remember the first time I went on an aeroplane after COVID, and I was really quite anxious about it. And afterwards I was like, it was fine. It really was fine. And I think people are feeling a bit like that about theatre. So we've just got to try and get them over that hurdle, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been doing a lot of focus groups, and something that's coming out here in Ireland and something that's coming out quite strongly is people don't realise how rarely they're going out now. It's like going out, they've lost the habit. I've had people say things like, it's only since I've been to this focus group and talked about it with other people that I realise how little we go out, and I've got to fix that. So there's this habit thing, I guess.
We've all got into a bit of a rut, I think. I'm just as bad as everybody, and you sit there in your slobby lycra and kind of go, oh, I've got to get dressed up. You know, I had to wash my hair this morning. But it's that, and you think, that's ridiculous. And then when you do it, and you kind of go, oh, this feels good. You know, it's really nice to have washed my hair this morning. I have washed my hair in 2 years. Not very often, but...
Okay. And then the other thing I don't understand is of the holding out people, 50% are avoiding crowds of people. That's only half of them. What's stopping the rest?
I don't know, because, again, it's perception, isn't it? I mean, they're not avoiding staying with their friends and family, which is probably where they'll get COVID. So I think they're making choices based... There's got to be a compelling reason to do something. If you want to see your family, you might take the risk. Mm. And maybe that's what... You know, we'll come back to this, but maybe we're just not giving them a good enough reason to do it.
It sounds emotional to me, you know, that there's this low level of emotional, persistent anxiety left over from all the crises we've lurched from. And I think that's interesting. It sounds like it's small, enclosed, indoor spaces with strangers.
Yeah, who won't behave themselves.
Or so it's other people. But, I mean, were there any differences across the respondents in that? I mean, are we talking about different levels of anxiety, or is this just...
What, with the holding out lot?
Well, with the people who've come back, they sound just as anxious as a lot of the people who are holding out.
Yeah, I think it's just the background noise, isn't it, of COVID. But when they choose to, it doesn't bother them. Mm. You know, they'll go to a football match, or they'll go to this, or they'll go to that. Mm. I think they're quite selective in when it bothers them. I don't know. They're a funny bunch, aren't they?
Well, that's quite good news, because it means that we don't have to make a logical argument. We just have to be reassuring.
I think we have to be reassuring, but I think we also have to give them that emotional shove as well. You know, giving them all the reasons that this is safe and that's safe. You know, great, but I've still got to get out of my lycra and wash my hair. You know, I need a really compelling reason to bother.
Yeah. Shoes. First time in 2 years I'm actually wearing shoes, not trainers, literally.
Well done,
I'm joking, but that's true. What I'd like to do is just give you an opportunity to ask questions that will help you understand the data. So what we're going to do after this bit is talk about what it means. But do you have any questions about the actual data? Annette, you're under a spotlight, so I could see you. Sorry. Yeah.
It just helps that those people are watching online.
Hi, Katy and Heather.
Hiya.
My name's Annette. I'm just wondering, the emotional thing about the anxiety for people coming back, has it come up in the research, either here or in the UK, about the driver of that anxiety being kind of guilt or shame? Because there was a lot of that here. You know, people were kind of feeling guilty and kind of almost shamed by, you know, your more COVID anxious brother or whatever, if you were out and about and they weren't, because there was kind of an underlying sense of blame being attached. if you got COVID or if you gave it to someone else. I'm just wondering, did that kind of idea of guilt or shame come out in
I'm
the
not
emotional?
hearing that from the focus groups. I really am hearing we've got out of the habit. I mean, I've had lots of people say, you're just not top of mind. You know, when I consider what we might do, I just don't think of you anymore. And actually, we'll talk in a minute about why they're saying that, because they're very clear about why they're saying that. And it is a habit thing. It's really interesting because during COVID, people were talking about having met their neighbours for the first time while they were sitting on their doorsteps drinking gin and tonics. And then they say, but we haven't seen them since. So there's a whole kind of habit thing that's kind of like just disappeared over 2 years.
I think what I have seen is, I mean, funnily enough, we didn't ask questions about guilt and shame maybe we should have done in the survey.
Well, it's difficult to tick the box that's
really
saying
hard.
I'm feeling
it,
shamed, isn't it?
But I think what we have seen is that people have assumed that it's people not like them that are behaving differently to them. And that's something we need to show them. These people are just like you, and they felt safe. Because I think they've othered the people that are behaving not like them and got, oh, yeah, but they're younger, or they're this, or they're that. We need to remind them that actually, no, you know, Mrs. Cannybody, who's just like you, has been to that, and she thought it was great. So we need voices of people who are like them saying, this is actually fine. And maybe those people that's coming through, maybe they've got themselves in a bubble of people that are all saying that, and they're feeding off each other. So we need to drop some voices into that of people that they would see as being like them, that are giving them the alternate view.
I've had audiences saying that as well, yeah, that they've ended up in this bubble of people who are just like them. Yeah. Any other questions about clarity? Yeah. Hello.
Hi,
Hiya.
my name is Vladka. I work at the Abbey Theatre as box office manager. So we've all been to a lot of webinars, discussions, and so on. And two bits of information seem to be popping up. As you said, that people are going out less, and also that they're picking and choosing what they are going to see. Is one of our focuses now to be, how do we compete with everything else that is going on in our city or our country that might take away people from theatre? Is that something that popped up with the conversations you're having? And also another one is that people want theatre, people enjoy spending time with family and friends more, and they will focus, if they're picking and choosing, I'm going to do one thing this week, it's going to be something I'm doing with family and friends. And then we need to create that experience or remind them that they can have that here.
We are so going to talk about that next.
Spot on.
Absolutely.
Come into the mic a bit.
I'm not going to say anything. I will when I say something.
I just wonder, so the cohort of people who attended the cultural event post-COVID, but did not go back to their art center or theater. Do we know if they went back more to cinema, for instance, rather than theater or art center? They attended a cultural event, though they did not go back to their local art center or theater. Does it mean that in cinema there are more attendees than before?
No, they're more likely, if they haven't been to the cultural organisation who sent them the survey, they're more likely to have been to outdoor events, things outside, and not anything indoors, and that would include cinema. We haven't seen a big spike in cinema. In fact, cinema's having lots of problems as well, sadly.
Yep. Any other questions about clarity? Oh, lovely.
Louise Donlan here from the Lime Tree Theatre and Bell Table. I just want to, on that question, I was part of a number of venues got together and compared some box office figures from February to the end of June, and any art centre that showed film saw a significant drop. In fact, cinema was the worst performing element of our programme. So just in answer to that previous comment.
Wow, so cinema was the worst performing element of your programme. Wow.
I've been doing some work with the Independent Cinema Organisation in the UK, and what we've seen there is that a lot of organisations that previously put on lots of independent cinema, art house cinema, switched to putting on more popular films. And what we saw is that audiences were choosing to go to the independent cinemas where they felt safer than the multiplexes, which they didn't think got cleaned properly. So where they went for the sort of the populist film, they were doing okay. But where they tried to plough on with the old programme, they were seeing massive drops. And my conclusion from that was that actually that wasn't, because they were sort of saying, oh, we think people have changed their film tastes. And I was like, no, you've just moved people from there to there. They're the same those people were over there in the multiplex, they've come in here, and the people that were here are watching stuff on Netflix, or that they're just not coming back. So,
I mean, that's good news as well.
yeah,
It's a new audience.
Yeah, we've got to keep putting on Spider-Man every week. Who wants to do that?
Hi, Dave here from the Gate Theatre. I was just wondering, was there any conversation about when people were booking, like how far in advance or anything? Because one thing I noticed when I looked at some of our figures were some of the poorer performing shows. When I actually look back at historical shows, in the lead up, they were actually quite similar up to a certain point, and then normally what we'd see is the week a show opened, there'd be a big spike, a huge jump, as obviously as awareness and stuff would happen. And what we're seeing at the shows now they're not doing as well is that peak is not happening, that it's kind of plateauing. So I don't know if other theatres have had the same experience or if that conversation happened with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, throughout we've been asking the same question since right back in May 2020 when we started asking audiences about this stuff. We started saying, when do you think you'll be ready to book, or when might you book for? And it's consistently been 6 months away. It's like 6 months. I'll think about booking in 6 months, and then, but then when they are booking for something, it's quite tight. So, and we'll come on to some of the reasons for that in a minute, but a lot of it is about money and risk. So we'll come on to that in a bit.
Thanks. Hi. I'm just wondering, in terms of the questions you asked, did you ask on any level whether the audiences you surveyed had been in contact with their venues, or what that level of contact was over the period of the 2 years? Were they getting regular emails? Were they engaging with those, and so on and so forth? Or were they just kind of abandoned or feeling that way?
Interestingly, we didn't ask anything about that, but we've got evidence that supports this, in that, so what happened when we first started doing this in May 2020 was it was in the context of that horrible period, which I'm sure none of us want to think about, between March and April, when it was just like, cancel everything. The only communication people were getting is, show's been cancelled, we'll sort out your money at some point. If you're lucky, is it being rescheduled? Am I getting a refund? What the hell's going on? I can't work my box office system, whatever it happened to be. So all they'd had was very sort of panicky service messaging, trying to tell them not to turn up to things. So when we sent the surveys out in May 2020 in the UK, we had this outpouring in the comments. We deliberately put comment sections, text fields in there, from people just saying, I'm so sorry about all of this, and just amazing outpouring of stuff. And a lot of the organisations realised at that point that they'd completely forgotten they needed to keep talking to their audiences during this time. But then, as the pandemic's gone on, it's again gone back to that sort of very functional service messaging, and there hasn't been there's been so much to communicate that I think it's been very hard to then go do the touchy-feely stuff. And most of the time, people haven't known what you're going to talk to them about. You don't know what's happening next month. But we have seen a lot of comments where it's the first time the survey's been sent out, from people saying, thank you, it's great to be back in touch. by and large, very supportive of the organisations. I don't think I've seen any comments with people going, what the hell have you been doing? Why haven't you been talking to me?
And that I'm just so amazed by the response rate. I mean, it shows that level of response to the survey shows a real kind of, commitment by the audiences, whether they're infrequent or frequent. I'm going to say a little bit about this later on because it's come up a lot in the focus groups.
Hello, I'm Vanessa from The Complex. I just wonder whether you've discovered a fear of cancellations, because obviously theatre relies on people, performers, humans, who are also subject to COVID. We have heard people afraid or reluctant to book because of fear of cancellation.
Yeah, we're going to come on to that because a lot of it's about financial risk again.
Yeah.
I have 2 online questions from people watching on the stream.
Hello.
There's 70 people. The first one is a question possibly to complement Dave's question. What does advanced booking look like for hybrid online-only events now that the theatrical is back? And then the second one was, are there particular kinds of events that people are coming back to over others, a preference for music over theatre or literature, for example?
Don't know about the hybrid thing. I think that the problem with the online stuff is it's been so inconsistent to be able to get any sort of sense of what the patterns are. There's this kind of online stuff that was just directly replacing the in-person experience. So, and largely that was aimed at the audience who would have come in person. So that was one thing, and a lot of those had problems with technology and all of that stuff. So, and the fact that you can just book it at the last minute and turn up or watch on demand or whatever it is, I think it's too early to be able to predict anything on those booking patterns at the moment, other than because it's online and they don't have to organise transport, they really don't have to book it until the very last minute if they don't want to. And presumably there's unlimited capacity, and they know that. So there's no incentive to book early. Sorry.
Louise, you've got some figures on what people are coming back to and what they're not coming back to, I think, from your research with the art centres.
I actually don't have them in front of me right now.
Louise, can you do rock and roll and really put your...
Okay, up here. Okay. I don't actually have them in my head at the moment, but you're right. It was very clear, what genres. We just split them up by 5, and remember it was theatre, music, dance. No, theatre, music. Oh, look, I'm not going to remember. I'm not going to try. But it was very clear. But what was most interesting was that the pattern pretty much, there was 1 or 2 outliers in terms of venues, but pretty much across the 9 venues where we had the figures from, the same pattern was replicated. And I suppose what we found most striking of all was that thing about the film, because for many of the venues, the film audience was very solid. It was always really reliable. You knew pretty much within 10 how many people were going to be attending the screenings, and the bottom had fallen out of it. So that was really what was most striking for me, anyway.
That probably suggests to me that core film audience who were very predictable were perhaps older as well, maybe? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Okay. This doesn't stop you asking more questions later on. But, what's coming out for me is that this is an issue of real contrasts. Some people are saying they want to come more often. Some people are coming less often. Some are anxious about COVID. Other people never want to ever wear a mask ever again. It's going to be really difficult to think in terms of a one-size-fits-all solution. So that's really what we've started thinking about, and we'd like to kind of raise some issues with you to talk about later. So go for it, Katy.
Kick off?
Yeah, kick off. Hurrah.
Okay, I've got to do this clicker as well. Hang on. Get my clickers aligned. Okay, so what we want to talk about is audience priorities, because I imagine... Let me put my water down again. Hang on. Sorry. I imagine that all these things are going through your head at once, you know. So what do we do about getting the same audiences back again? Should we abandon the ones who don't want to come? To what extent do we need to be doing digital and other formats, and how do we need to be doing that, and who's that going to attract, and who's it for? Is it for our existing audience? Is it for a new audience? And then should we just forget about existing audiences and just go for brand new audiences and start again? You know, all of this going on at once, and you've probably got people in your organisation going, I think we should do this, and you're going, oh. It's like, how do you even start to make sense of all of that? So this is the audience priority matrix. I'm sorry, it's a little bit business textbook, but I've used this for years to try and help organisations make decisions around audience and programme priorities. But I actually think it's particularly useful in this context when we're all trying to juggle so many things. What it's for is to help you to decide where you want to prioritise your efforts in relation to developing your audiences. There is no right or wrong answer, but the tool can help you think through where you want to be and where you want to invest time and effort for the medium and long term, as well as focusing on the here and now. So in the bottom left-hand box is where we think about the effort you put into getting existing audiences to come to your current product offer. So the stuff you're doing now, getting existing audiences to come to it. And that's really about frequency and loyalty, isn't it? Probably the bulk of what you did pre-COVID. And we know that it's, 5 times more expensive to get a new customer than it is to keep an existing one. So actually spending time on that is going to be time and money well spent. Then you've got, what do you do to encourage your existing audiences to take risks and try new things? And that might be about nudging them into different program choices so that they increase their frequency and loyalty. It might be things like deepening their engagement, becoming volunteers. It might not be program related, it might be stuff like that. Or it might be things like post-show talks, getting them to sort of have a more in-depth relationship with you. Then we're talking about your existing product and experiences to new audiences. So that's about what you're currently doing, but finding new people for it. So that's about growing your audience, not getting the existing audience to come back more, but actually getting new people to come. And then in the top right-hand box is kind of diversification, really. It's where you think about what projects or program or experiences would we create or do differently in order to attract different types of people. Okay. Now, a lot of people, when I've talked to them, have said to me, audience development is that top right-hand box. I would argue it's all of it, because it's about developing your audience in different ways. Now, you may decide for your organisation, some organisations say, well, actually, our mission is just get as many people trying what we do as possible. So that top left-hand box, it doesn't matter whether they come back again, you've got endless budget, but that's what we're all about, just getting lots and lots of people through. For other people, it's about making sure that they have a small audience that are really deeply engaged, not only coming very frequently, but really, well entrenched in the depth of their programme. These are your choices, but it's worth bearing in mind that the further away from that bottom left-hand box you get, the more time it will take and the more money it will cost, and the more resources required to deliver that. Okay? So it's worth bearing that in mind.
And it kind of feels like an emergency, doesn't it, Katie? So, I mean, we all need to plan for the future, but actually I feel quite anxious about this season.
Yeah. Yeah. So the here and now is the bottom left-hand corner. What you can do something about now is the bottom left-hand corner. But obviously, if we all just did that and didn't think about growing our audiences or diversity, we'd just become stagnant, and those people would literally die. So we can't just do everything in that box, but it's about balance. And it's quite interesting when I've used this actually to plot, to work with organisations to plot their programme. And we got the marketing team to do it, and we got the programmers to do it. And we said, who do you think this bit of stuff you've programmed here, who's that for? Is it for the existing audience? Is it in the mould of the stuff we already do, or is it something a bit out there? And who are you aiming it at? We've got the marketing team to do it, the programming team, completely different matrix. And it was quite interesting because there was one organisation had everything in the top right-hand box, everything they were doing. And I said, it's no wonder that you're knackered and you're skint, you've got no marketing budget left, because it's really hard work, that stuff. So, okay, so let's move on. So let's look at these in turn then. So the bottom left is our existing audiences for our existing work. So it's got a big fat treasure chest in it because, as Heather says, you know, this is where most of your ticket income has come from in the past. We know that existing and frequent audiences who come back to your core programme make up a disproportionate amount of your income, which is why even a small proportion of them, that 12% not coming back, is going to have a big impact. So the big question is how we're going to get those existing audiences, many of whom are holding out, and many of whom are going to come less frequently, to come back. I'm going to park that one for a minute, and Heather's going to come back to it. So let's have a quick look at the other three boxes. So in a post-COVID world, what does this box look like? What could we change about the product, the way that we do the product, maybe the format of the product, to appeal, to help our existing audiences to access it? So, of course, we've seen a lot of organisations shift their work off-site, online, outdoors, and this is effectively what they're doing. This fits in this box because they're modifying their product. It's not the same product, they're modifying it in order to appeal to those existing audiences. And things like cabaret-style formats have done really, really well in some organisations. Simply just changing the format so people can book a cabaret-style table and have drinks brought to them rather than in a crush at the bar and all the rest of it, has done really, really well. And outdoor work, as we know, has also done very well, although this picture doesn't look like it. So I think that was before it started.
I've been really amazed by how the festivals this year have done lots of kind of performances aimed at bubbles of people. So you've got the kind of security of having a relatively small audience of, say, 15 or 30, but also you can kind of like book out a whole bubble and know that it's only those friends and families who are not going to give you COVID that are going to be sitting next to you.
Of course they're not. And actually, when I was talking to Anna about this, she made a really interesting observation that a lot of the festivals over here have buffered their programme from cancellations with bigger numbers of smaller events. So, you know, what we're seeing here with, you know, cancellations because of cast and stuff, actually having lots of smaller events has sort of buffered them from that a little bit. And you know, an emphasis on outdoor events and smaller numbers. Harder work, though. So this is an example. Do you want to talk about this? Okay. So this is an example from last year's Galway International Festival. The thing I really like about this is that it was offered in lots of different formats. So I don't know if you can see at the bottom there. Volcano can be enjoyed individually or as a series, live or online. So it's like you can do the box set, you can do the watch on demand, you can be there in person, or you can watch it live online. So it's kind of covering all the bases. And yeah, really like that, you know, hedging all your bets, isn't it, really, with the audiences, because you don't know what they're going to do. So really like that. Then we get onto this top left-hand box. So this is about trying to get new audiences for your existing work. Well, the good news is that you're already very good at doing this. So, Heather, what are the stats on this?
Well, we've got data from, last lot of data was from the performances in 2016 for 60 theatres and art centres and festivals. And on average, 60% of your audience, it's something like 62% on average, were first-time ticket buyers. And actually that ranged right the way up to sort of 80% for some of the festivals. And this year I've been looking in detail at 4 organisations and manually deduping the data God, I was bored during lockdown. And it's true that even with the data deduped to household level as opposed to individual booker level, that is what you're doing. You are incredibly good at getting first-time ticket buyers.
So that's good, but is there anything more that we could do to get some of those, perhaps the types of people that don't currently attend? And you're probably already doing this without realising it's in the top left box of my matrix. You're probably already experimenting with the balance of your programme, making shifts here and there, upping the amount of this that you do and reducing your film or whatever it is, to try and figure out what that balance is. We've recently done a survey with 100 organisations in the southeast of England, for example, who say that they're feeling much more confident about selling art forms such as circus, family work and outdoor work to new audiences than trying to get them to come to the more traditional genres. I don't know if that's the same here, but it's just really interesting that they felt a lot more confident that they could get the sales from new audiences for those types of things. So, what programming shifts could we make? How would we start to sort of, and I'm talking about shifts, not like massive revolution, and crucially, how will we know if it's worked? If we do change something and tweak something, how are we going to know that it's actually worked? It's interesting that, Project is a really good example of this. They've made shifts in their programming and already starting to use language to reflect and demonstrate that. Choose from theatre, music, dance, visual arts, and everything in between. Again, let's cover all the bases. So, really good to see that. And then the top right-hand box is our it's possibly the hardest, isn't it? Because it's medium to long-term stuff that we're talking about. And it's really about innovation, because it's about changing what you do in order to get people that you don't already have a relationship with. So that's kind of really hard stuff. What would we do differently in order to try and engage different kinds of people from the ones that we currently have now? We're going to spend some time looking at this in one of the marketing forums that are planned over the next few weeks. So I'm not going to dwell on it much now, other than to just quickly show you this, which I really like. It's an innovation funnel. So I haven't just got a matrix, I've got a funnel as well. Hurrah. Now, innovation always seems like a really good idea, doesn't it? Nothing else seems to work at the moment, so I'll tell you what, let's just do something really mad. But it's worth bearing in mind that it isn't just a mad idea that comes to you at 3 o'clock in the morning and then magically works. It's a process. It's innovation. It could be innovation around anything that you do, not just the artistic program. It could be, we've seen innovation around format. That might be a clue. It could be around customer service, all kinds of things, not just artistic. But this graphic really appeals to me because it changes the idea of innovation from being that light bulb moment at 3 o'clock in the morning to a rigorous process of generating, sifting, developing, testing ideas, being open to things not working, but crucially not just then going, oh, well, that didn't work then, learning from it and taking the bits that did work and then going, okay, how should we do this differently? It probably requires lots of little experiments to kind of throw bits of jelly at the wall before you work out which one sticks. So this is not the thing we should all run to immediately, but it's something we need to sort of have on our agenda, to be thinking, okay, this needs to be going on alongside all the other. It's easy for me to say, isn't it? You're all run ragged. But if you want to do this, you just need to think about the time it's going to take, the process you need to put in place to do that, and the resource and the effort required. So let's go back briefly to the existing audiences, and Heather's going to talk about the treasure chest.
So I think this is a treasure chest for two reasons. It's where the money is coming from at the moment, but also you have this incredible resource, most of you, which is your database. So it's great we've got the Ticket Solve team here because you can quiz them later. And I've been spending quite a lot of this year looking into the treasure chest in various organisations and seeing what's there. It's kind of interesting, actually, because one size does not fit all. And the vast majority of your audiences, and the last benchmarking data that we've got in 2016 showed that 70% of your audiences come once. That's it.
Once ever?
Ever. And again, these organisations that I've been rummaging and deduping and all the rest of it, it's once ever. So is that a complete waste of time, all that time and effort that you've put into getting a new audience if they come once and then that's it, they've gone? Probably. So, yeah. Can we have another click?
Yeah.
Because Katie's come up with a
Doggy.
There's a doggy who's sniffing things out. So we've got all these people sniffing things out, coming once and never coming back. So we've got them, but their engagement with us is really, really brief, and it's a complete waste of our time and effort unless we kind of get them to do something else. So what's the next one we've got? Ooh, butterflies. They're people who come really quite frequently for a very short period of time. So maybe just for one season, they come and see 6 or 7 shows. It happens a bit with festivals, but I'm only finding about 2% of ticket buyers are like this. You know, they either disappear completely or they stick with you. And it's because the likelihood of people coming back once they've been back once is really high. It's about 80%. So if you get them to come back once, they're much more like once more, come back once. Yeah, absolutely. Then they become very likely. And next we have got the barnacles. Yeah, perfect. I'm amazed by this coordinating clicking that's going on. I'm really impressed. They're really weird. They're about 14% of audiences on average. They're with you for a long period of time, but they don't come very often over that period of time. On average is around 3 times over 5 years. But they're committed, and bizarrely, quite a lot of people doing fundraising find that the barnacles are likely to donate as well as the sort of very frequent attenders who stick with you a long time.
And those are also the people, if you phone them up and say, why aren't you coming very frequently? They say, I am. They think they're frequent attenders. Well, you know, they are for them, but not in our definition.
No, absolutely. And then finally, we've got the angels. Oh, it's so lovely. There aren't very many of them. 4% purchased for 6 or more events on average in the benchmarking. So there are not very many of them, but because they come so frequently, they're really, really important to us. So actually, we need to really focus on some clear strategies, I think. We can no longer just send emails to these people. We really do have to think very hard about how we get the maximum impact from these different groups. So why aren't these sniffers coming back? I mean, they are so important. There are so many of them. They're as important as the people who come very frequently and are loyal over time. You know, they're as important as the angels. Well, here are the possibilities. And I can tell you right now, it's not negative experiences. I can't believe how forgiving audiences are. You know, they see something, they didn't like it, and they go, I didn't like that. It wasn't my cup of tea, contemporary opera, but I'm really glad that I can say I saw it. You know, I've learned something
So
here.
then you see it again?
No, probably not. But they've seen it, they've tried it, they know it's not for them, and they feel they've learnt something. So they're very forgiving. COVID anxiety. Well, we've seen actually it's quite a big reason. It's an emotional reason rather than a logical reason. And actually, it is probably something we can do something about. What they need is reassurance and a reason to come back that outweighs that anxiety. That's certainly what people are saying in the focus groups, and it's indicated by Katie's data. And here's the really scary one, the no compelling reason to return one. You know, they're saying there wasn't anything I wanted to see. Well, if you unpack it, which is what I've been doing in the focus groups quite a lot, the big reason is that they didn't know it was on. And I've got audiences over and over again saying, you're invisible. I'm sure you're more invisible than you were before, before the pandemic. And I think there's something going on about how we engage with people. We've forgotten in our lurch to online over the pandemic, we've forgotten that actually we need to be visible offline as well. And the other thing is that we're not being persuasive. They're saying that you're not giving me a reason to come back. We're not getting on people's mental shortlists of things to do because of those two things. Well, I mean, that's what they're saying to us. Maybe, this is what's going on in our heads. But I am seeing this in reality when I'm looking at how people are doing their marketing. So we'll talk about this a little bit more later. And then there are practical obstacles. And I'm really interested in this practical stuff because everybody says the same three things, and this is whether you're in Australia, where they've done huge amounts of research, the United States, where they've done huge amounts of research, and the UK, where we've been asking, why don't you come since 1982 or something like that. Peter Verwey did the first survey, didn't he, back in 1982. Same thing. I'm not interested, I haven't got time, and it costs too much. But actually think about those things, because they're actually saying something really important. They're saying, I'm not interested because it's not relevant to me. I haven't got time because it's not worth the time, because it's not relevant to me. I've got better things to do. And it costs too much is it's not worth the money because it's not relevant to me.
Yeah, because if you made the tickets a £5, if they're not interested in it, they're still not going to come.
The Royal Shakespeare Company, I was at the Royal Shakespeare Company, had this brilliant idea, free tickets. Could we get rid of free tickets? Well, yes, we probably could, but nobody came. We started charging £2 and people turned up because we placed a value on what was going on. Yeah, and then finally, it's this thing about it's difficult to get there. Oh, my goodness me. A third of people are saying that they are likely to continue to work from home at least more than half of the week. And suddenly we've got a local audience who had maybe been thinking of the convenient, familiar journey as the one that they do to commuting, but now it's just walking down the road. Do they know what we do? Probably not. So let's unpick my rant about compelling messages.
Okay. So we think we need the 3 R's. Get me things sorted out. We need to reassure them about that low-level anxiety stuff. So let's get that out of the way. We need to remind them of what they've missed. And we need to give them reasons to return. So it's kind of the why not stuff, but it's also plus the why. It isn't enough just to give them the why nots. Oh, COVID sorted, health and safety, hand sanitizer, whatever it is. That is important to some people, and it does need to be there, that low-level anxiety. But we also need to give them the compelling reason why. I'll do this. We trawled back through all of our various bits of COVID research over the last 2 years to try and unpick what this low-level anxiety stuff is all about. And what we came up with was that, broadly, audiences were looking for 5 different types of reassurance, and some of them needed some bits of that higher in the mix than others. Okay? So early on, that health and safety bubble that's there in a small bubble at the top was front and centre, wasn't it? It was like masks, hand sanitizer, social distancing, all of that was right there, and it was at the top of everybody's web page and all the rest of it. And over time, that sort of disappeared, and it's just in some cases, it's just not apparent at all now. But I think, this week, just seeing that what's happened here with cancelled performances and everything else, I think that's starting to be top of mind again for us. Not sure if it's top of mind again for the customers, not sure about that, but there will be some audiences, we know that holding out segment for whom they still need reassurances around health and safety. I think there's the brand reassurance. It's something that's come out of some of the focus group work that we've done, and I'm sure it's come out of yours, that people were really worried about coming back and feeling like it wouldn't be the same organisation. It would feel very different. It would be over-sanitised. Sitting in a socially distanced auditorium wouldn't feel right. It would just all be odd. So they need reassurances that actually you're still the brand, you're still the organisation, that you haven't changed beyond recognition. The big one for me at the moment is financial reassurance, especially with cost of living crisis and all the rest of it, and picking up on some of your comments from earlier, that people need to know. I mean, it was horrifying, wasn't it, when we all had to cancel performances and people had to cancel holidays, and you heard all these horror stories about people just not getting their money back or not being able to get refunds or whatever it is. And people are really wary now about booking for something that may not happen and then them not getting their money back. I went to the tennis on Saturday in Birmingham, the pre-Wimbledon women's tournament. Not a ball was hit because it was pissing down all day. And I'm not getting my money back. They've rolled over my tickets to next year. Doesn't happen for another year. And I spent 250 quid on tickets. And I should have looked at it before, but, you know, that financial reassurance is really important. And interestingly, it's more important for families and for younger people than it is for the older people. The health and safety stuff, more important for the older people. Go on.
Why is it more important for families?
Well, for a start, they're buying 4 or 6 tickets. And they've made a decision to spend that family time doing that instead of going to a theme park or whatever else they're going to spend their money on. And if they think that they're not going to get their money back if it doesn't happen, and they then have to have that family experience and spend money on that somewhere else, they're just not going to book. So we'll show you a couple of examples of that. Social reassurance is the most important one for young people. So what I mean by that is, you know, early on when it was like, is the bar even going to be open? Can I go and have a drink before the show? Can I have a drink in the interval? When we first started doing, I don't know what it's like here, first started doing performances again in England, organisations mistakenly thought that it was all about the art. And so they said, we'll file them all in these, you know, these holding patterns and stuff, and we'll get them all in, and then they'll sit there terrified, enjoying the performance, and then we won't let them have a drink or a piss, and then they can sod off. And it was like, you know, it was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible experience. And so that's social, for young people in particular, if I buy my ticket separately from my mate, it used to be general admission. Have I now got to sit in a certain space, and where are they going to sit? And can I meet them for a drink? And are we allowed to talk to each other? And all of that stuff. And do I have to pre-book my drink in the internet? It sounds like I'm obsessed with drinks. But, you know, for that audience, it's really important. And we did some work with an EPOS provider who does all the kind of bar and catering software and stuff, to find out how important that element of attending an event is. And for those audiences, it is at least half. It's 50% of the kind of deal, the social bit, the having a drink, the going for a meal beforehand, all of that stuff. And I know as artists, we often don't want to acknowledge that, but it's really important.
I picked this up in focus groups, and it's not because they're all alcoholics. What it is the food and drink give you an opportunity to talk about what you've just seen. So I was concerned about people being really cross when there were shows without intervals. And it's because they didn't have a chance to kind of process and discuss and engage with the art with their friends. That's why they love cabaret tables as well, because they can make eye contact when there's a really good bit, you know. It's about feeling that sense of a communal experience, which you don't get without the social side.
And also, for families in particular, it's about ritual. So I know when I take my kids to the cinema, we have to get the popcorn and we have to get this. It's what we always do when we go to the cinema. So there's an element of ritual for people as well that perhaps we don't perhaps acknowledge enough. And then there's the access reassurances. This is particularly for audiences with disabilities or access needs, that the stuff that's come through very strongly for them is that they've been forgotten, and that, have I got to queue up? Have I got to stand for ages and queue up if I've got mobility difficulties? Are the wheelchair spaces still going to be available? All of that, plus the sort of very practical access things around, I haven't been for 2 years, is that car park still there? And, and actually I'm travelling by car, and usually I would be travelling by public transport, but I'm not doing that now because I'm worried about that, so I'm going to come in my car, but I don't know where to park. So all that kind of basic level information that we might assume that audiences just know, they need reassurance about it. So we've got a couple of examples to show you. This is a really nice one from the Mermaid in Wicklow, where they've got their COVID-19 guidelines with a lovely picture of 2 ladies masked enjoying some socially distanced visual art. But also the getting here, so the access stuff, the parking, the access stuff, facilities and access, opening hours, ticket info. They're not assuming that anybody, that's all very reassuring, and it's not in your face with your masks, but it's all there. And so I really like that. I really like this example from Coventry, one of my clients in Coventry, for the social reassurance stuff, because you remember we talked earlier about, it's other people that are doing that, it's not people like me. So they worked really hard on putting some pictures of the sort of target audiences, 2 older ladies enjoying a cup of tea. So it's not even about what's going on in the theatre, enjoying a cup of tea, slightly socially distanced, and a quote from them: "Eased us back into the theatre gently, good social distancing, well done, Belgrade." These are actual quotes from their audiences, from their surveys that they've played out in social media, showing really positive images of people. Whether you would use quite the masked up images now, I don't know, but just that kind of gentle reassurance, really, really good. Then the Lyric Belfast, this is a really good example of the financial reassurance. Instead of no refunds, it's book with confidence, what they're doing. So what do they say here? We've updated our terms and conditions. If you develop COVID symptoms, simply get in touch. And we'll exchange your ticket for another performance or a credit. No refunds, but they've used such lovely positive language that I will book with confidence. Yeah? Maybe if the tennis had done that, I'd be less sore about it. This is another really nice one from Ipswich. This is massive. Our refund promise. Yeah? Now, they are giving you a refund, I think. Yes, you can have a full refund from them. So whatever your policy is, and a lot of organisations I've been talking to have been saying, actually, we do have quite a good refund policy, but it's hidden away in the back end of our website, in our T's and C's. And I know one organisation who had done that, and they put it right front and centre. They did a little logo that said, "Our book with confidence guarantee," and they saw those pre-sales massively go up. Just because they put it on their homepage, and on everything they sent out on email, it was front and centre. Basic stuff, but it kind of works. So, Heather, you're going to talk about this.
Yeah, so we need to remind people what they've missed. And thank you, Katy, for asking the right question so that we've actually got a clue about what we should say to them. So it's about the buzz of being at live event. It's about things to look forward to get you out of the house. And what struck me so much is in the focus groups is people saying, "I didn't know until I came and talked to this group about it, how rarely we go out nowadays. We've got to sort that out." So they're not even aware of the change in their habits, and they need a nudge to understand, that actually they used to do really exciting stuff and look forward to it. Yeah.
And then it's the big one, the reasons to return.
The reasons to return. I mean, we've talked about relevance, haven't we? I love some of the examples that we've seen of this, and we'll show you one in a minute. But we're not very good at talking about things from the audience's point of view, and I think we've really got to change that. We're also very bad at reflecting the audience. So I was really struck by the Belgrade Coventry examples, where you're actually seeing yourself in in the marketing material, you're actually being invited to be part of this whole thing. It's not just images of the shows. And in some of the focus groups, people have actually talked about that kind of image in a really, really positive way. You know, actually seeing themselves having that experience is really powerful. I know that in the facilitated discussion sessions about this, people talked about the things that were selling really well being the kind of jolly, happy stuff. I think there was an extra dimension to that, which is not everything has to be jolly, but it's got to be life-affirming. Everybody's so fed up with feeling miserable that actually the sense of there being a positive, they're going to come out of the event feeling positive is really important, and their well-being is so important to them now. I mean, goodness me, in the focus groups, people talking about the impact of lockdown on them, on their mental health and so on. It's really staggering how much it's made a difference. This idea of not only empathizing with characters on stage, but feeling part of a group of like-minded people, feeling emotions together. And again, this idea of deliberately going and finding something that's going to change your mood. A lot of the work that's been done around the psychology of entertainment is about this idea of managing your mood, particularly music, people selecting things that will help them feel how they want to feel, whether it's, I've just broken up with my boyfriend to, like, for God's sake, I want to feel happy. Here's my lovely example. Just wonderful, positive language from this show with Dublin Dance Festival, but also a real playfulness about the imagery, all sorts of different images that were so quirky and emotional and kind of, signalling relevance to those of us who've kind of got beyond 30.
What I like about this example is that, the older generation are the ones that have been told to hide themselves away to stay safe, and they're vulnerable and they're not strong and powerful. And the wonderful thing about this image is it's actually giving, this is the target audience, let's face it, for most of us, this older audience, and they've been made to feel frail and unwanted and hidden. And this image in itself just goes, no, you're strong and powerful, and it's just really wonderful. That's more of that, please. So we had a go, didn't we?
We did have a go.
Tying this back to our little personas with your existing audiences, the butterflies and the sniffers, their reassurances that they're going to need are going to be much more around that kind of financial reassurance that, that they need. Are they going to get their money back if they can't come or the show's cancelled? And that social reassurance we talked about. Whereas the people who've been with you a longer time are they're going to be looking for the brand reassurance. God, have they changed? And the access stuff. Am I still going to be able to get my favourite seat? And can I have that seat where I can stretch my legs out? And all of that stuff. And the health and safety stuff is going to be more important to them. And then the reasons to return, the butterflies and the sniffers, it is going to be much more about that buzz of a live event and the get out more. Come on, get your glad rags on, do your hair, get out. And that FOMO, the uniqueness of that experience really playing up the fact that they are going to be in the presence of that performer, and that performance is never going to happen again like that. That immediacy that I think we've all now really understood post-COVID, that grabbing those moments. And for these people, again, that are perhaps more culturally engaged, seeing their favourite performers again up close, real-life actors up close, something to look forward to get them out of the house. The shared experience, as you were saying, Heather, much more important to those people being with their theatre tribe again, and supporting the venue, much more important to those. So, you can have a play with this, but those were our thoughts on the sort of reassurances and the sort of reasons too that you might think about. Heather, I think nearly there.
That's the message, but I think there's a really huge issue that's come out in the focus groups. We've mentioned it already, and that is that we're invisible. Seriously, we're invisible. People are literally saying, I can't find out what's on. I don't know what's on. You know, you used to be really visible, I could tell. And it's because we're not doing the basics that we used to do. The number of organisations that said to me that they don't any longer do enough print to distribute around town. They don't do posters. I mean, I thought it was interesting with the Jubilee. I was fascinated because...
That's the Jubilee in Britain, for those of you...
our Jubilee. I'm very proud because I spent the whole of the Jubilee being a town crier's assistant wearing a big black moustache. 4 days with a moustache. My top lip suffered. Yeah.
Why a moustache? You're supposed to be the Queen or something.
Well, because I was the town crier's assistant, you see. So.
Of course you were. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. I hid and avoided the whole thing.
Yeah. So I was looking at what were the villages in my kind of county doing to get the whole community out, you know, when they hadn't been out for ages and people were still feeling anxious. They were doing things like putting the programme on the front of the village newsletter, that banners everywhere saying, you know, come and join your community in doing this thing. Posters everywhere, you know, literally everywhere you went there were lampposts with posters on. And it was the stuff that's about reminding people you're there, because focus group participants were saying to me, I don't open emails anymore. I'm just so sick of all this online stuff. I just don't open them anymore. The algorithms are now making it almost impossible to get your message in front of people via social media. I follow loads and loads of Irish arts organisations. I get nothing, because I'm not near enough to you to get your advertising, and none of your organic social media posts are getting enough likes or shares to actually get anywhere at all. So we're literally invisible. People are saying, you know, you've been gone for 2 years and suddenly you expect me to go and find your website and find out what's on. You're just not at the top of my mind. You're not an option. So we've got to change the way that we're doing our messaging for the moment to account for post-COVID. You know, we've got to be visible, because this C element in you know, the conventional way of looking at this, we're just not there. So we're not even doing the think stuff because we're not visible. So we're not on the short list. So they're not choosing from what we've got. We're really, really good at you know, persuading them to buy tickets for an event. But that's only the people who've actually seen our message. And that's only a small proportion. And we're really, really, really good at the care stuff. Oh, hang on a minute. What about that 70% who only come once and then disappear? So we're actually only good at the care stuff with our very frequent, very loyal attenders who bother to open the emails. So there. That was a rant, Katy.
Yeah, I'm scared. Right. Okay. We've done that, haven't we?
That was us in conversation.
We've had a conversation. Yeah, we've done that now.
Let's head over there.
Sit over here. Who wants to? Go over there.
Cool.
With me.
I'm hoping I've got one. So we're going to have to remember to do the mic. Yeah.
Do you want to introduce yourself, Lucy?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Lucy Costello. I'm Head of Marketing for TicketSolve. Big shout out to Theatre Forum for having myself and my colleague Elin here today as well. And thanks to Heather and Katy, that was so insightful, and looking forward to the discussion ahead.
So we've kind of done a rant of top of mind things that come from the data and the focus groups. Lucy, is there anything that's coming across for you from the actual data itself and how clients are using it?
Thank you, Heather. I suppose something that I'm kind of keen to just touch on very briefly, and it's something, Louise, sorry for picking you out here. You've been involved leading up the project that you mentioned about as well, just in terms of how we're using our data and some of the insights that you and your cohort have also pulled up on. And we've been working closely, pulling those reports with that cohort and also with Theatre Forum. But I suppose a big topic that's coming in terms of what the data is showing us, and not to put a negative spin on it, sometimes I think data can really quickly highlight the parts of what we're implementing that aren't working well. And it can be, something that'll very quickly show you where you're going wrong. Unfortunately, it can be very, very hard to pull from that data how we can make it right. But I think presentations like this have really helped. But the big one for us is, and I know our colleague, I believe from the Gate, has pulled on it, is our last minute bookers, and just how much kind of strife and grief it's really giving teams here. And maybe what I'll do is kind of open it up to the floor and maybe touch a little bit on that topic, is how can we kind of look at our frequency timeline now of our purchasing paths, and how can we potentially navigate our community or our marketing communications around how are you going to be able to communicate with these last minute bookers who potentially now are dropping off at that peak that we've seen. How can we potentially cling on to them and to gain those spikes if we see that the purchasing trends are very much towards that last minute, it's a Friday, I'm feeling good, my friends are feeling good, my family are feeling good, we're not sneezing, why don't we go out? So is there anyone here who has those similar issues or arguments internally where how can we get these last minute bookers, or is it something that you've seen or potentially not seen within your own organisation?
Well, very much so. Last minute. I suppose my colleagues could speak better to this, but when we were doing that research, that was one of the key things as well. And I suppose anecdotally, other venue managers have been saying this to me, that people are leaving it to the last few days. Actually, the day of, not so much, but the maybe 3 to 4, 3, 2, that's when the bulk of bookings tend to come in. So. But it's anecdotal. We didn't actually do any. It's just from observing it ourselves. I don't know if my two colleagues behind me want to add to that, because they would know more about it.
Yeah, well, I agree. I'm Jill, and myself and Cy were here with Louise from the Lime Tree and Bell Table in Limerick. Since January, we've really noticed that exactly what Louise has said. But I think just what you said there, Heather, is really interesting about, we've really been, the narrative around our discussions over the last number of weeks is we do feel invisible. We've been doing an awful lot. We feel like we're really working hard and we're not getting the return on the work that we're doing. And there is a large part of what we're feeling is that we actually do feel invisible. So myself and Sive and the team have been really looking at that and seeing, but then like the discussions this week, they're around going back to, we want to print a physical programme for our autumn programme, for example, for the first time since the autumn programme of 2019. And the cost has gone up around paper, around the distribution of that, and so what we're just down to a granular level of how many units are we going to print, how much is that going to cost from the design, the print, and the on-post element and delivery of that, and what's more effective and where are we going to put that money. And it is really around trying to encourage our audience to see us, number one, and then to actually book more in advance than what they're currently doing. And I'm sure that all of the venues here and it's all around, okay, they're spending their money at the moment because people are tired, they're exhausted from COVID and from the negativity around news, and they want to go on holidays. They might not have the money then, and we're not being seen, and we're not being an option, because that's what their priority is at the moment. So we're actually focusing now on our autumn programme to see how we're going to get the message out there that we want our audiences back and to book in advance. So I'm sure every team here can relate to a lot of what you're saying, but it is constantly a discussion. And it does feel like, in a way, that we're shooting in the dark, like we're making decisions, but we're not sure they're the right ones, So.
And one observation I make back is, Heather and I are old enough to remember the olden days when there were no websites and it was all print, and you did have to put everything in the brochure because that you had to distribute it everywhere. But actually, I just wonder whether, if budgets are tight and we've got these big emotional messages to get out there, reasons to return to your local arts centre or theatre, maybe, and I know the budget usually goes with the show and all the rest of it, but if there was a way of getting some more generic postcards, bookmarks, print, just really little bits, beer mats, God knows what, out there that just drive people to the website to have a look, then actually they'll last longer. You can keep reusing them. You can even do door-to-door, people's doormats are a very underused bit of marketing, in my view. I look at stuff that is dropped onto my doormat in a way that I just delete emails. It's old school. Even Amazon have started doing it, putting things through people's doors. So I just wonder, if budgets are tight, whether that might be a way of doing it, to just get the generic message, check out your local arts centre, there's stuff on, there's, here's 10 reasons to come back or whatever, and all those things.
Yeah. I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning this, but Aoife from the Mermaid's been actually testing this, and she had to do at the Mermaid a cut down version of the brochure, for reopening, nightmare. So it was a foldy outy thing, and it just had a stunning image and 30 words of killer copy, really, really good talked copy.
Sorry, we just swap the mics.
Okay. Sorry. So 30 words of killer copy and an image, and it drove people to the website, and they looked at the impact, and it worked really, really well. Better than the normal brochure. So, because you could see the selection in one thing, I think, and there was lots of lovely sort of generic messaging around being back, I think we had a comment over here.
It's on relation to the same topic, and it's something I've been thinking of for a while, actually even before COVID, but I think it's particularly relevant now, that it's probably time in an ecosystem as small as Ireland's, where every theatre and arts organisation probably knows every other one, to actually start looking at, when we're talking about funding, is obviously an issue, printing is quite expensive, to look at a centralised, possibly Arts Council funded or theatre co-funding together, and something along the lines of the Great Western Way was an incredible national campaign that drove tourists into the west of Ireland that's been hugely successful. And I really think it's time for us to talk about theatres are back, arts organisations are back, to have a national campaign, to start there to get visibility back, and then we can start looking at our own ones where that would help with costs for actually printing stuff and having national conversations about theatre and arts organisations. I think it's really important for us to actually look at something as big as that.
Sorry, just very quickly, we might come back to that at the end, but these discussions are feeding in to an Arts Council brief about a marketing communications campaign later in the autumn. And Annette, we will get to you, Alex, sorry. I know you're
I just want to pick up on something Lucy said about and Dave about the trend for last minute, 3 to 5 days out ticket purchasing, and whether, I think what you were asking, Lucy, was should we lean into that and kind of push I suppose marketing communication to get people to buy in that window. And I'm just wondering, it's a bit of a white knuckle ride, waiting until 3 minutes before the show, and I'm wondering instead or concurrently, do we want to do almost a kind of a wave-shaped thing where actually we are putting energy into way in advance and incentives for getting people, giving people an actual reason, starting our marketing campaigns earlier, giving early birds and incentives for people to book early and let that ride out, and then keep a little bit maybe in the tank to do the final push, so you kind of grab the people on the last 3 to 5 days. And I wonder, like, do we need to rethink a whole kind of timeline for how we approach, how we communicate?
You've got such a good point there. And what I'm hearing is that people have made the decision that the show is on their short list of things that they could do way in advance. They've actually, put a tick on the brochure or printed something out on an email and put a star by it or something like that, and it's pinned to their notice board. Notice how they're talking about physical things here, but it's the financial insecurity issue. They don't want to book until just before, just in case they get COVID and don't get their money back. So actually it is about pushing the message really, really early, topping it up, and then that final thing to actually make them go, I'm not sneezing. I'm going to book. I'm going to actually do it. Yeah.
I just add to that. I do think, I think there are people like me who are planners in life, who will always want to plan early, but even I am nervous about booking things after what happened on Saturday with my tennis tickets. So I think if you can get that, here's the 5 reasons to book early, you'll get the best choice of seats, blah, 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 all the reasons why you would want to book early. And there's no reason not to, because here's the financial reassurance. If you get COVID, we'll give you a credit note or whatever it is, the book with confidence stuff. I do wonder whether there's something about, then there's the other people who will always leave it till the last minute, and I wonder whether there is a bit of leaning in that could go into that. It could almost be a kind of, you sign up to this last minute list, and on a Monday, we'll tell you what's available for the next week. And it could be that you sign up to be one of those last minuters, and that you're kind of going, come on, this week's show. And it's deliberately playing into that to those people who will always be those last minuters. I don't know. It's a thought that then, you kind of... And if you start to segment the audiences by the people who previously were planners, we did this with an RSC season, actually, years and years ago, where we worked out that there were a group of people who always booked early, and there's a group of people who always booked last minute. And so we segmented them and got the brochure to those people early and absolutely secured that money and gave them all the reassurance and talked to them in the language that they needed, because they needed very different communications than those people. They didn't care whether there was somebody off the telly in it. It was the RSC and they wanted to see it. These people needed a lot of nudging, and so we timed their communications differently, and it did make a big difference. So maybe you're right. It's about, just accepting that and going with it, but you don't want to turn your planners into last minuters. That's the trouble. So you've got to secure them and give them what they need to guarantee those bookings. But then the white knucklers, you've almost got to get them into a habit of going, I get the email on a Monday and I can see what tickets there are left. And I mean, one organisation I worked with did a thing for very local residents where they basically said, we issue on a Monday. I mean, they had a lot of tickets to sell and they had a number of venues, so it might be different. It might be something you need to do in partnership. But the email would drop and they'd say, right, every ticket we've got left is a tenner for local residents, but you have to be on this scheme and you have to join it. It wasn't you didn't pay for it, but you had to join the scheme to do it. And they targeted it at communities that were particularly underrepresented in terms of their theatre audience, and they kind of did it like that.
Hello. I'm actually on the same topic of I suppose, the booking patterns, and I think this is purely observational now because I didn't, crunch the data, but I think it depends on the show as well, because there's loads of shows that book quite early and book out quite early, and I think there's no fear there, whereas there's shows that really are the kind of the last minute, and I wouldn't say last minute, last day, because as Louise said, it would be maybe 3-4 days before the show where people decide. So I think it is probably related to program as much as it is to the demographic and the kind of decision making related to financials,
But do you think do you think that I suppose I'm just challenging whether it's the show or whether it's the sort of people who book for that type of show?
Perhaps it is, but actually when I look at the shows that sold out in advance, these were the shows that were you'd consider for older audiences.
Yeah.
So they are planners, but at the same time they would be in the risk group for going out. So so it is quite illogical that way, because they would be the ones being more afraid going out. That's what you would think. So they would leave it later to buy.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. They're the planners, and they're going to take a lot of persuading, but they're the planners. They want to book early, but they need a lot of reassurance to do that. They don't want to leave. I don't think.
Yeah, you've given them a compelling reason that outweighs their anxiety. It's something they want to come and see, so they'll book for it.
So in effect, it is a programming. It is really very much a programming thing, in that those events that we know are reaching those audiences are the ones that we can rely on, are going to sell well. So I suppose, we've been discussing this a lot. There's a shift needed in our programming, I guess.
But I don't think it's the show. I think it's the people who go to that show who behave that way. So having a better understanding of the types of people who go to those types of shows might help with some of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Paul from Untitled Art Centre. I think it's important to keep the lessons from lockdown going, in that a lot of us had to pivot, I think was the word we all used. Pivot the way we worked. We kept pivoting until we came back to where we started. But so we turned from a presenting house to a production house, and we've continued that on now that we've reopened, and so I don't know if this is different, this makes us an outlier, but our audiences are way bigger than they ever were before, because the work is very different. It's no longer in our building. It's not online, but like huge outdoor events that are often free, because there's more funding for this kind of stuff than it ever has been before, means our end of year kind of audience number will be way higher than it ever was before. Not the revenue, but so now that's very hard, because on that graph with the dog and thing, there was a thing that said you need more time and more money to do it. And obviously in lockdown we actually had more time, because we didn't have to run a venue. So that was grand. And we had loads more money, because there was loads of funding coming in from different places. I suppose the real challenge will be, how do you do both? Keep running the venue and do these very, very large scale outdoor projects that pull in thousands of people for free is one of the kind of challenges going forward. But it's possible.
Wow, well done. And we have seen a lot of that with things moving off-site, moving outdoors, being really, really successful. But it sounds like that's a central part of what you now do, doesn't it? So it's like, why would you want to go back? I suppose it's, money, I guess, but.
I think it's interesting looking at the festivals who've had to kind of tackle all of that this year with uncertain funding, and they're doing small scale outdoor things. I'm thinking of Louise White's Singing for the Terrified. I've forgotten the title, but it's relatively small scale, but it's outdoor in a park. It's maybe pivoting again just to make it a bit more affordable, I guess. But abandoning it, absolutely not the right strategy there. Hallelujah.
And I wonder. I'm guessing that the demographic of that audience that you've got for that work is different from the demographic you would have had in the venue. So making the case to Arts Council and others about the value of that work, even if you're not getting the financial return on it, in terms of giving access to theatre to new audiences and hopefully reeling them in over time is huge.
Hurrah!
Well done. Hearing it, Anna.
Anna's looking at her watch. One more question. If you've got one more question, burning issue. Yeah.
Is our missing audience talking about missing digital program, because we all pivoted to digital, but it really died down and there's no consistency in it anymore? So was there talk with the missing audience about digital? Is there interest there, or are they fed up with digital?
We didn't ask it in the Ireland survey, but we have done quite a lot of work on audiences. A huge percentage of audiences came to digital for the first time during COVID. And so what we saw is about 30% of them had tried digital before COVID. Another about 50% tried it during COVID. And we've gone back to about 30% carrying on with it. We wanted to ask all sorts of questions about substitution and, are people now more likely to just not go to live events because there are things digitally? And that's not the case. In fact, we did some research with Marquee TV, who are one of the major platforms for ballet and opera and music, and found that actually the very frequent attenders just wanted to watch stuff online as well to supplement what they're doing live. And actually, many of them saw artists for the first time online, and it increased their appetite to want to go and see them live. So I think there are opportunities there, but the big challenge is that audiences were saying, but actually, I don't know where to look for it. I don't know where to find this stuff. Because there isn't a platform to go to like Netflix for this stuff, so I don't know where to find it. Most of them had only been exposed to digital content from the organisation they already had a relationship with, and so that was quite tricky. They didn't know where to go and find it. And they said, but a lot of those have stopped doing it now. But it was incredibly important for disabled people, vulnerable people, the people who are feeling, people in rural communities. It was really interesting. We did this bit of research where we found that people in rural communities were less likely to be engaged with digital, and we went, oh, well, rural audiences don't want digital. And then those that, when we asked them what they wanted, they were like, yeah, we definitely do want digital. And it was the broadband stuff. It was the broadband. They really, really wanted it. And so you could read that data in two ways and go, oh, rural audiences don't want the digital stuff. They absolutely did. They had more of a demand for it. And the people who are feeling most vulnerable about COVID want to carry on. But it's not going to substitute, I don't think, from what we've seen, the live performance.
Yeah, rural Lincolnshire. Yeah, it's the broadband. I also think we've completely underestimated the amount of time and effort it takes to develop an online audience. And can I just point everybody towards the glorious resources that were developed with Theatre Forum's digital forum last year? There's loads of stuff there, really good, straightforward, no-nonsense guidelines about how to engage with a digital audience. It's not easy. It takes investment. It's exactly the same as any other kind of audience development. But yeah.
Cool. Over to
Anna. Just to say, first of all, thank you so much to the 70 people who were with us online and had a really vibrant conversation. Thank you. There was loads in the chat about lots of different things, including a desire to have a lot more chat about film audiences and cinema audiences, and some great comments from the IFI and from Access Cinema and everything. And also some comments about the impact of hybrid working on audiences, which is something, obviously. So in terms of what we're doing next...
Anna, come up here.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I think that'd be good, because this is great stuff.
I don't have much more to say on that, but anyway, that's that. But thank you. I'm always happy to come on a stage. Just to say, do you know what? It's just so lovely as I'm riffing here now. It's just so lovely to see you all in the same place and everyone having a coffee. Can you hear me okay? So, as you know, we've put together a marketing forum and we have a mailing list for that, and over 100 people have already signed up. We've asked people if they wanted to do it online or in person. About 40% of people said in person, but we're going to do the first two online simply because we want to roll them out really fast. We want to record them. But in the future, we'd love to do in-person events. And yeah, so let's get the first two done and then we can make some plans together. So we've got two coming up, and we're working with Katy and Heather and the Ticketsolve team on this. The first one is on Wednesday, the 29th of June. It's 11:30 to 1. It's going to be talking about winning and welcoming audiences back, effective marketing strategies and tactics. We're going to be talking to you all. We're going to be in touch with anyone who's registered for the forum. We're going to be in touch about how we can weave in lots of your examples into this as well. And the second one is going to be on the 13th of July, also a Wednesday, also in the morning online, and it's going to be about reframing marketing communications and developing new audiences. So there are two things coming up, so please share that registration with your teams and everything. We'll email, after this is all over, we'll email you all later on anyway, and we'll give you the link if you want to watch this back online as well. So that's mainly it, really. Anna, do you have anything else you want to say? No. Just obviously, thank you so much to the Abbey for hosting us. It was just so lovely to be here as always. We've still got some tea and coffee. Val, do you want to say something? Sorry.
Please, yeah.
Can you pass Val this one?
Yes, just say from the chap's remark down there earlier on about the Arts Council's involvement. I mean, this all began back in March with, reports coming in of, through the forum of difficulties with audience and erratic behaviour by audiences. How dare they? And Catherine Griffin in the Arts Council, who's the acting communications director, she's been involved in this throughout, and all of the work that has been done that was commissioned with Katy and with Heather, our own updated behaviour and attitude survey. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that. I presume you are. This is the more, whereas Katy, as she was pointing out, is very specific to audiences belonging to individual art centres. Behaviour and attitudes is the population at large. So it's very interesting to see. And we will, you can buy questions in a monthly behaviour and attitudes survey, which is what we're doing. But right from the very beginning, this isn't the Arts Council doing a riff on Nina Simone or something. This is a very specific, if you like, sectoral-driven promotion. And so my interest in all of this is, what's going to come out of this forum here? And in fact, we only really had a little bit of just one remark in passing about it, about, well, what's the Arts Council's promotional, or can we have an Arts Council promotional campaign? The answer is yes. Will we fund it? Yes, we will. Will we, will that be an extensive one? Yes, in as much as the sector drives it. So we're very reliant here on Theatre Forum driving this, but in particular zoning in on the messages. So there are possible messages here that you have said. But we need, some of these things have not really been interrogated as much as they might be. For example, what is the impact of home working? And indeed, Katy, we don't really know there from your own figures, and I can understand why, the geographical location of some of these things. So, a particular result in Dublin might be quite different to a particular result elsewhere, rurally. So we need to kind of zone in on them, and right from the very beginning as well, there's two things. There's the kind of, why don't you go to your art centre and have a brilliant time and get out with other people, and that kind of very general message. And then the other one is to do with specifically, why don't you go to this show which is touring around and is going to hit these places? And by the way, we can zone in of going from, let's say, a national campaign to a local one, which has always been proved to be very effective. If you hear something on one of the national stations and then you hear it reinforced locally, that can be very effective. But we're not, we don't have a huge communications department to plan and run all of this stuff. It has to be driven by yourselves. But really, the main reason for that is to make sure that the Arts Council doesn't go off on a tangent that Belinda, that you might not necessarily agree with, or that doesn't tie in with the results that you're getting from your audiences. It's really important that we get that right. So we're willing to, we've agreed that, Council has agreed to support that, and here we are now, though, in late June. And, to have the full impact of something, I know the summer is kind of a downtime for the arts centre sector in certain respects, but nonetheless, programmes are going on. But of course, the start of the year is September. So, it wouldn't be to be starting a campaign then. It would be to be well into the campaign at that point, so that one can see results in September in particular. So, I mean, I don't know what impact that has. Perhaps I should have spoken a little earlier, but it is important to get the message to Theatre Forum about what the messages are, both nationally and locally. So we're waiting. Catherine would be here, except she's on leave at the moment, and before this was ever planned, she was on leave. So apologies for that. But of course, there'll be a recording of it, and she'll be able to hear it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Val. The timing of the 2 marketing forum sessions in the coming weeks are intentionally designed to allow people to adjust, adapt, or change their programme, or indeed the presentation of whether it's a refund promise. So that's quite deliberate, to allow people to feed anything that they take away from today and from the next 2 sessions before mid-July. The bigger issue of the brief and the target and the messages for a national marketing communications campaign funded by the Arts Council will, I think, emerge from, informed by today's discussion, but I think the Arts Centre's working group are meeting next week, the day before the first marketing forum, and that is on the agenda for that, obviously. So the work is happening and the discussions are happening, but today is the first time that the survey results have been shared with the sector. So we will be open and alert and waiting for your input and your feedback, and in fact would welcome it over the next few weeks, because really, I suppose it's these few weeks that will determine the success of a national marketing campaign, and indeed then the individual marketing campaigns of each theatre and art centre to complement that. But they will be complementary. I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. So it's about sifting and sorting the messages and directing them in a relevant way. The national campaign is probably the bigger challenge, because an art centre's or a theatre's own campaign is informed by their own audience, the makeup of their own audiences and historical patterns of attendance and ticket purchasing. The national campaign is much more difficult, and it may well be that it needs to take an audience position rather than, the sector position, and applaud audiences. Somebody suggested that a campaign might be to applaud audiences for their support and thank them for their support and their continued support through COVID, and welcome them back. That's one option, as opposed to saying to them, come back to us because, we need you and we missed you. So it's sifting those messages and sorting them and creating a hierarchy that makes sense, both from the Arts Council's point of view, the Arts Centres and Theatres point of view, and the audience point of view. Yeah. Linda? Yes.
Sorry. No, I thought it was very helpful before when both the programming that we need, that there was a demographic there that, we're saying, well, there hasn't been anything, where are our partners in this and making the audience, so that the conversations again would involve people who are actually touring. And if there is, because, we're at the stage now where I'm sure we're back to, the letter that was written in the Irish Times, almost in 2008, because the confidence has to come also for people to tour and to bring the product to us, and then so that we can have that sort of mix of our own produced programme, as Paul was saying, and, sort of excellent touring productions to us.
Just to say that the campaign that's been kind of a draft of a campaign being put together, waiting for input from this group and the working group and whatever groups, the marketing forum on that. But we need to get information coming through on that as to what is going to be the content of this. So the general idea would be that there would be a voice hired in order to sell this on as a national thing. That's one of the main ideas going on. So a voice that's simply recognised nationally by simply everyone, and you can imagine the sort of people that might be involved in that, and the sort of person that might be involved in it. To make the kind of love your orchestra type general thing, or go back to being together. Isn't it wonderful to get together at a cultural event? Obviously, I won't be drafting the detail of it. And then on the other hand, and I think this is very important, for all the Arts Centre directors who are here and the marketing managers who are here, and indeed online, is that it's been suggested that it might be a good idea to have a marketing forum for those people who are busy selling work, and that. Rather than it being something that's general, how do you sell work? It would be, how do you sell this work at this time in these places? And so, it's not for everyone, it's for everybody who is working on that. And we're very willing to support that with the finance needed to perhaps bring in somebody to facilitate, ignite something among a particular. So you can look ahead and see what's in your programs and say, okay, well, what about that? And this is very specific. There's nothing general about this. We say, let us zone in then on that particular tour of cavalcaders by Druid, for example. We're going to do that. And a Druid will have their own ideas on that, but how are the art centres going to do it? How are you going to absolutely maximise what it is that you're going to do here? And that's very predictable. You know what you're going to be doing over the next few months. So it would be a matter of looking for resources from us to do that. Again, via Theatre Forum. So I just strongly encourage you to make your views known. What would help you individually in your particular thing, whether you've got problems in common with other people, just present your problem and say, actually, I've got to worry about this. What are we going to do? And we're really willing to get involved in that.
I think, Val, we'll just come to Annette now in a second, but I think, Val, the marketing forum on the 29th and the 13th, the first two sessions are simply the start. Those sessions can evolve in whatever way the marketing teams want them to evolve, and they can be applied and used to whatever effect people want to achieve. Yeah.
I mean, if I understand this properly, the kind of general, the arts are great, messaging, whatever campaign, what that might be. I mean, I don't know if it's helpful, but I wonder, is it useful if we are to input as a sector to that? Would it be useful for us to think, like other people do this, the tourism sector do this, they do destination marketing for Ireland. They don't sell a particular experience under that, but they're very skilled at emoting the attraction of Ireland, which is my understanding what this national campaign might do. So perhaps if we are to input into it, maybe it's not about the individual messaging of our particular venues and festivals, because that will sit underneath the big, emotional, on the, I'm thinking Les Mis, come on, the arts kind of thing. So maybe that's what we need to think about as humans and as Irish people. What gives us the buzz? And maybe that's the kind of thing that might inform the messaging for the grand national campaign. And then, we can all work like Billio on the get them through the doors underneath it.
Yeah. I suppose remembering back to Irish football fans being considered great fans, maybe there's a message in thinking of Irish audiences as being great audiences. And just reminding them and making them, I suppose, encouraging them to behave as great audiences by going back and acknowledging the fact that they have supported over many years. But I said we will keep you up to date. All of the, whether it's the presentations, the reports, the surveys, the discussions, will all appear and continue to appear on the website. So please, do stay in touch and do keep talking to us. We do welcome and value your input. It's especially important in the short term. And before we let you loose for tea and coffee, because I realise that you have been sitting for quite a while, just to say, and to thank the working group and everybody who contributed to that along the way. Katy and Heather for joining us today, the TicketSolve team and Lucy, and everybody here at the Abbey and the Arts Council for their support in bringing all of us together, and for people sharing their expertise and to continue to share that expertise and insight over coffee and cakes in the foyer. Thank you.
Just one last thing. Sorry. I think it's really, really exciting that TicketSolve are involved for those of you who've got systems, because you've got some things planned to help us all through this process. So you're going to be communicating with us all about that very shortly. But literally specific things coming out of this session and out of the things that you've been saying as clients, but also out of the marketing forum. So how wonderful that TicketSolve are being so responsive. Thank you.